Paul Scheerbart was a German writer, proponent of glass architecture, and would-be inventor of a perpetual motion machine who had problems with alcohol and supposedly starved himself to death in protest of World War I. Scheerbart has a very decadent German tendency of adding appendices to his titles that are all very delightfully German. The early and first of the two novels that we are going to discuss from him today is his 1898 Na Prost, which amounts to basically cheers in the sense of a toast, has the subtitle Fantastischer Königsroman, aka a fantastical king novel. Now, the plot is supposedly that three learned individuals saved themselves from a comet that was going to rend the Earth in two by launching into space in a giant bottle, which ties back to the title of the novel, but that also has a literal sense to all the drinking taking place in the ship. However, most of the novel ignores these depressing implications of the Earth just having been destroyed, though there are a few moments where the gloom of the situation does overtake the three protagonists when they aren't too drunk to properly take it in. But most of the book is just these three professors telling each other stories, allegories, and philosophical parables. Some of them are interesting, though short, such as a narrative of a bunch of goats gliding over the sea to dance on a beach, or a short story which blames the eruption of Mount Etna on Cyclops getting lazy with their coal shoveling, or the story of a princess who becomes a giant and tramples all over her father's garden. But there are others which aren't that good or have much or any point, like the story of a fly sitting on a cube of sugar in her grandmother's tea, or the story of a great planet-destroying space dragon that just kind of randomly turns into a woman and then just ends. Every story or allegory, regardless of how good it is or bad, is, however, basically killed because the three professors decide they have to go over the entire thing, forming a teeth-grindingly boring autopsy of every single possible interpretation, debating the specific meaning and use of words as if trying to decode some sort of big universal secret, and sometimes the discussion ends up being far longer than the story itself. There are also very few moments when these three actually talk about something from the distant past, and this is one of the very few moments when these discussions aren't teeth-grindingly boring. For example, there is one section where they talk about the subway, and they tend to believe that the reason for the subway existing is so that riot police can march through it to beat up protesters. The whole thing seems maybe like it's supposed to be satire. I mean, it is introduced with a poem about the police state and is dedicated to my hated Richard Demel. But the deep philosophical meanderings, some of the stories with actual fantastical narratives, and the occasional glimpses of doom and gloom when the debaters aren't drunk enough to forget that, the Earth just got blowed up, don't really gel together very well. Now, we go to cover one of his last novels, Lesabéndio, an asteroid novel which was published in 1913, a year before his death. This is the story of winged suction cup people living on a funnel asteroid who can stretch themselves to 50 meters length, have telescope eyes, a multitude of arms, and go to sleep by sniffing weeds that grow on their arms and grow giant balloon skins to sleep inside of while blowing bubbles. The novel concerns itself with building a series of towers up to a mysterious shining cloud that it rises above their atmosphere and provides day and night at various intervals, along with a mysterious group of meteorites that sort of float above this and which was only glimpsed later on in the novel from another planet. The beginning of the novel will keep your interest just by describing these fantastical locales and situations, as well as describing how these beings will come into existence. Not exactly procreate, because they don't do that. They simply find these giant nuts underground, and when they crack them, a new inhabitant of the asteroid called Pallas just kind of is inside the huge nut, and then these will explain the various weird experiences and visions they had before they were born of living on other planets, including one who describes living in a series of gigantic tubes where you couldn't see from one end to the other. And the ending of the novel will also keep you interested with the description of the various weird astronomical and physical phenomena that start taking place as soon as the cloud layer above Pallas is pierced. But the middle portion just drags the entire thing down, because it can best be summarized as there is a vague technical problem with the construction of the towers. One person talked with another person about it for a bit. Then they go to a third person and they all talk about it for a bit. And that goes on for several pages until someone suggests the solution, and then they do it. Rinse and repeat for chapter after chapter for the entirety of the middle portion of this book. I genuinely believe that you could have just cut this down, and the novel could have worked just as easily, in fact much better, if it was a third shorter than it is. And this is made kind of worse because the characters are basically all the same. There's really nothing to differentiate these characters. They're just kind of very empty husks, which is maybe just one thing that they like to do better, more than the other. Another thing, like they want, one person likes to grow plants as their artistic hobby. Another person likes to polish surfaces to be exact, to be exact and polished and not have any angles to them. But that's about it as far as differentiation of the characters. There really isn't any kind of society described here. In fact, the people, the characters, and the inhabitants of the Pallas star asteroid just kind of, all they do is they just build stuff, or they do artistic stuff just for the sake of it. And really there isn't any character development to really speak of, which is a shame. And I mean, the fantastic elements in the beginning can keep your interest despite this, but when this boring technical stuff starts happening, you really don't have anything to really latch on to. Now, and of course, the mundane architectural problems really won't interest most readers, and I think Scheerbart, who really was obsessed with architecture, just really didn't see this when he was writing. Now, besides this novel, and his other fantastical or semi-fantastical novels, Scheerbart wrote a series of historical vignettes from Old Babylon, Assyria, and even one from Palmyra, which has the delicious title of Von Leuten, die den Kopf verloren, Palmyrische Fackeltanznovellette, which can be translated as Of Those Who Lost Their Heads, a Palmyrian Torch Dance Novelette. These, unlike his books, are more realistic historical pieces, sometimes just brief glimpses without much actual plot, like his Audience beim König, Audience with the King. And these were published in only magazine form during Scheerbart's life, and have thus far never been collected into a proper physical release. Now, Wakefield Press, that is wakefieldpress.com, not the Australian one, of the same title, of the same name, have begun issuing some of Scheerbart's novels in English, including Lesabéndio, and they've even published his diary chronicling his attempts to construct a perpetual motion machine, and at this point are preparing to publish his novel about the awakening of Baron Munchausen from several hundred years long sleep, which is something that definitely merits at least some attention from the concept alone.